Let's talk about one thing more important to lobbyists and the gun industry than children, than houses of faith, than human beings. Let's talk about profit.
It's double action, so it's still loaded.
In the days after Columbine, with their convention scheduled to proceed the following week only a few miles away, the NRA met to discuss how to proceed. They discussed setting up a fund for the victims' families for $1 million before abandoning the idea, for fear it would be seen as admitting some responsibility. They discussed canceling the convention, but they expressed concern internally about how their more extreme members would react. Eventually, they went ahead and sent Charlton Heston out to give a fiery speech condemning anyone suggesting policy change in the wake of the tragedy as trying to politicize the death of children. He argued for more guns everywhere, all of the time.
From my cold, dead hands.
If that sounds familiar, it's because that speech has formed the core of the gun lobby's message to this day, and that message has been incredibly successful. This is the story of how the NRA and the larger gun lobby won and continues to win so effectively. And not surprisingly, it all starts with money, big money. Every time there's a mass shooting in America, politicians put out statements of thoughts and prayers, communities gather for vigils for the victims, and people vow to make a change. Oh, and gun sales skyrocket.
The interaction between hate, fear, conspiracy, society coming apart at the fringes, that's the same thing that drives gun sales.
That's Ryan Bussey, a proud gun owner who went into the gun sales business right after college, eventually rising to an executive position. But he became increasingly troubled by his industry, and after 25 years, he left to advocate for gun reform. His book, Gunfight, reveals how he believes the industry has radicalized America.
If you're an African-American family in a place like Buffalo today, are you more or less likely to go buy guns than you were like 2 months ago before the Buffalo shooting? You're probably more. You're trying to do what it takes to protect yourself and your family. So you see how this mass shooting creates more gun sales, creates talk of gun bills, creates then people on the right who buy more guns. Then the people on the right have more guns, and disadvantaged minority communities then have to get more guns because they're worried about the people on the right. You see, it's this ever faster spinning spiral that just feeds itself.
This trend has been building for years, ever since a certain Illinois senator became president.
If you look at gun sales through the last 30 years they're mostly flat. They're between 3 and 7 million units per year. Up until 2007. That was the year at which Barack Obama, America's first black president, started to lead in the polls. And that's also the year where the NRA and the industry coalesced around this plan. The NRA knew hate, conspiracy, fear, racism, those can drive political outcomes. And the industry sort of sat back and was like, holy shit, that's the same stuff that drives gun sales. In 2007, as our national radicalization started to really light on fire, so did gun sales. The nation never bought more than 8 million guns per year before 2008, before Barack Obama became president. By the time Barack Obama left office, it was buying more than 16 million per year. The last year of Donald Trump's office bought almost 25 million guns.
Even the solutions the NRA and the politicians they fund put forth to curb gun violence lead to more profit.
Implement the very best strategy to harden their schools, including effective, trained armed security.
Hiring armed guards, adding barricades, revamping security systems, limiting doors.
Having one door that goes in and out of the school, having armed police officers at that one door.
These measures take serious investment, bolstering a private school security business that already brings in $3.1 billion annually. The recent gun bill set aside $1 billion for schools to revamp their security and $300 million for increased training and equipment. That's a lot of money. But does it work? Uvalde was already a hardened school on May 24th, having received almost $70,000 to spend on the project. And yet, all that security proved futile. Research over 18 years done by UToledo professor Dr. James Price found no evidence that hardening schools prevented gun violence. But that doesn't stop the NRA from pushing its message, because even the threat of gun violence makes money. So pro-gun advocates call for more armed guards and the arming of teachers. Now, requiring teachers to carry guns may strike some as extreme, but does it work? After all, as we've heard over and over, the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun.
The only thing that's going to stop a bad guy with a gun
The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun
is a good guy with a gun.
Is a good guy with a gun.
The NRA was quick to praise a bystander who recently pulled out his pistol and killed a mass shooter in a mall in Indiana. But the truth is, these kinds of examples are statistical unicorns, according to the New York Times. Only 3% of attacks over the past 2 decades have ended in a civilian shooting back. And that good guy with a gun might actually make things worse. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine recently signed a bill reducing the hours of training for a teacher to carry a gun in a school safety zone from 700 down to a maximum of 24 hours. According to their own numbers, NYPD officers hit their target when they discharged their weapons in real-life situations just 34% of the time. And that's after years of training and experience on the job, or a lot more than 24 hours. A minimally trained teacher would presumably have an even lower success rate. And that's when the good guys opt to use their guns at all. In Uvalde, Texas, 19 good guys with guns waited around for more than an hour while a shooter murdered 19 children and 2 teachers. According to the chief of police, they needed more equipment and more officers to do a tactical breach. In other words, even more guns. So we know the NRA has a lot of money to spend, and we also have a pretty good idea how they spend it. The list of politicians receiving donations from the lobby is long. Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Josh Hawley, Mitch McConnell, even supposed gun moderates are on the list. Mitt Romney has received more in total from the NRA than any of his peers. It's true that Romney was one of the 15 Republicans who voted for the bipartisan Safer Communities bill that President Biden signed in June, which will require more stringent background checks for under 21s and ban domestic abusers from buying guns. It's the first major federal gun control legislation in 30 years, but many critics say it's too modest. It doesn't go nearly as far as 1994's assault weapons ban, the last piece of federal legislation. The NRA's influence was certainly a factor. After all, the NRA claims to have enacted 382 pro-gun bills from 2013 to 2018, and effectively killed any gun reform for decades. But is the reason for their success purely money? After all, other lobbies from lucrative industries have not proven as successful. Big Pharma and tobacco have both seen reformative legislation curb their growth. What does the NRA have that they don't? The answer? Loyalty.
The gun lobby was the first, I think, to perfect what you see now on the right. Political observers now are understanding that what's going on the political right really isn't a top-down thing. It's bubbling up from the base. It's this radicalized millions of people who think it's okay to put "Let's Go Brandon" stickers on their truck and intimidate kids and use AR-15s as political tools. You didn't see like people rally around cigarettes. You didn't see like cigarette bumper stickers on trucks. It didn't bubble up from the base. That was a top-down, moneyed guys in $3,000 suits who work for Philip Morris. That's where that came from. That's not the way the gun industry lobby works. It works because legislators, senators, congresspeople are freaked out that a few thousand people in their district or their state are going to be single issue voters and organize and threaten and troll and do all the stuff that the gun lobby does from the bottom up. That's what's different about it.
With a mandate that comes from their rank and file members and not just the industry they support, the NRA can use that loyalty to hold their politicians accountable. The NRA's Political Victory Fund ranks every politician as a way for gun owners to see who they should and shouldn't vote for. Their grading system publicly flags politicians who align with the NRA and their political agendas, and more importantly, those who don't. If a politician votes for stricter gun laws, the NRA will throw the full weight of their money at unseating that politician. And knowing how much money they spend and how loyal their members are, the threat alone can sometimes be enough to keep incumbents in line. In federal elections since 2010, the NRA has spent more than $148 million. Nearly $91 million went towards unseating candidates who vote for reform. So, with a deep war chest and the fierce loyalty of their members, the NRA has proven to be a formidable opponent to meaningful gun reform legislation. So what can be done? The answer might lie with addressing the cultural attitudes around guns themselves. Because of relentless NRA messaging, guns, especially those high-powered weapons of war, have become part of people's identities, deep-rooted symbols of their politics and culture.
One of the things I'm fighting for is to sort of reinstate the norms that I talked about that were industry insisted on, not very long ago, 15, 18 years ago. It's not like it's ancient history. People talk about the AR-15 as if their granddaddy and their great-granddaddy owned them. Hell, less than 20 years ago, they were a pariah. Almost no company sold them. We have to stigmatize that again. And I think that reinstating social norms is going to prove just as important as any legislation we do, but they're going to have to go hand in hand because one's going to have to reinforce the other.
So, while passing common sense gun laws is the main goal of gun control advocates, the real fight might be repairing cultural attitudes around guns and treating them like the destructive devices they really are.
People ask me all the time, how can we fix this? So I will say, I don't think it can be fixed per se. I think that in a democracy like ours, we're going to do things that make it marginally better instead of making it marginally worse. There's so many things that are so common sense, right? Universal background checks, come on. Why aren't we doing that? Stronger red flag laws, come on. Essentially, if we're going to have guns in our society, which I'm a gun owner and I appreciate guns, but if we're going to have 400 million guns, we're going to have one hell of a lot of responsibility.
No matter what broadly popular solutions we, as a society, may attempt, we can rely on the nation's most powerful lobby to fight us tooth and nail with its money and the single-minded focus of its members every step of the way.